Hi guys, it's Angie with Fun Endeavors Tie-Dye Lab. Today let's try out one of Dharma's newest ice dye colors called Rattlesnake. I'm going to do a rolled design on this shirt. So I'm going to begin by laying the shirt out flat, and then I'm going to grab one corner of the hem of the shirt and fold it up past the opposite shoulder of the shirt. Then I'm going to use a washable marker and I'm going to draw myself a line on the shirt that I'm going to use as a guide to roll. Beginning at one end of the line, I'm going to begin to tightly roll straight on this line. And as I'm rolling this line, I am encouraging the fabric on either side of the line to roll as well. As far as the line goes, you can mix it up. You can make your line straight, you can make it curved, you can just pretty much do whatever you want. Once I have the line rolled, I'm going to go ahead and fold the shirt over right on that line that I rolled. The piece of fabric that's hanging down longer than the rest of the shirt, I'm going to go ahead and fold that up and then tie this design with some kite string to hold everything in place. I'm going to incline ice dye this design. So I'm going to take the shirt and I'm going to place it inside of a piece of vinyl guttering. Then I'm going to attach a piece of kite string to the end of the shirt and attach the other end of the kite string to the end of the vinyl guttering using a metal clip. This will help to keep the shirt from sliding out of the guttering when I incline it. To incline the shirt, I've placed it down inside of a plastic tote. And I have one end of the guttering down inside of the bottom of the tote and the other end hanging off the edge, which has got the shirt at an incline. This is one of the smaller plastic totes that I use. It's about 28 quart in size, and I would venture to say that the sides on it are probably about 6 inches tall. So it's not quite as tall as some of the other totes that I use. I'm going to do a combination of dye under the ice and dye over the ice for this shirt, which if you ever see the letters DUI in relation to this, that means dye under ice, and DOI means dye over the ice. So I'm going to lightly sprinkle the dye over the top of the ice. Then I'm going to add an additional sprinkle of dry soda ash over the top of the dye. And if you'll notice over to the right, you'll see a gray container that's filled with ice. That I purchased at the Dollar Tree dollar store, and I think it's intended for a pencil holder inside of a desk, but it is the perfect size to fit on these pieces of vinyl guttering. So I've filled it with water, froze it into an ice chunk, and I'm going to lay that on top of the shirt. But if you'll notice, I have an area right at the very end that doesn't have ice. So I'm going to get a couple of larger cubes of ice and place at the very top of the incline where I don't have any ice. Then I'm going to lightly sprinkle a little bit more dye over the top of the ice. So to get the good color splits, you don't want to use too much dye, because when you use too much dye, once it blends with the melting ice, it just kind of makes more of a solid color. So I want to go a little bit more light-handed with the dye, but this design is pretty thick. So I'm adding dye under the ice, and I'm going to add some dye over the top of the ice. And I'm hoping that gives me some really good color splits. Once I have the dye on top of the shirt, I'm going to place it aside and I'm going to allow the ice to melt. After the first layer of ice melted, I came back and I looked at the shirt, turned it over, and I had quite a bit of white or lighter areas on the shirt, especially on the sides of the shirt, because like I said, this is a really thick fold. So I went ahead and turned the shirt over and I applied more dye directly to those really light areas on the side, and a little bit of a light coating on the back side of the shirt. Then I went ahead, added a little bit more dry soda ash and another big block of ice, along with a few more cubes right at the top of the shirt. This time I did not add dye to the top of the ice. I just left it alone. Then I placed the shirt aside and allowed this layer of ice to melt. And after this chunk of ice melted, I still had some undissolved dye on the shirt, and I was a little bit concerned I wouldn't have good color saturation in the middle of the shirt. So I went ahead and added another larger chunk of ice to the top of the shirt and allowed it to melt as well. Then after that second layer of ice or chunk of ice melted, I left the shirt alone and allowed it to process for about 48 hours. But this time to process the shirt, I took it out of the vinyl guttering and placed it down inside of another plastic tote that has a metal rack in the bottom. I put the lid on the tote and placed the tote outside where it was nice and warm. That way the shirt could process in the heat. After 48 hours, I took the shirt to my utility sink and I began to rinse it. I started rinsing in cold water to rinse out the soda ash. Then I warmed the water up to hot and rinsed in hot water to rinse out the excess dye that didn't bond with the fabric. I untied the shirt, rinsed a little bit longer, and then instead of rinsing for a long time in hot water, I went ahead and soaked the shirt by placing the shirt in my utility sink along with some really hot water and a little bit of Blue Dawn dish soap. When the water cooled off, I changed it out and I continued that soaking process until my water was remaining almost clear. Then I placed the shirt along with some Dharma's professional textile detergent into my washing machine and I washed it using a hot water cycle. Okay, so the shirt has been washed, dried, and ironed, and let's see what this color looks like. Okay, so what do you guys think? Because I think this one looks really cool. I really like this color. I got all kinds of color splits out of this. I have shades of brown. I have some olive colors. I have beige, and I have both pink beige and yellow beige. But I just really think it's pretty, and I think it works really well with this design. Honestly, the way the dye flowed and the way the dye moves, I think it works great with a color that's named Rattlesnake. I was a little bit concerned with as much dye as I was adding to the shirt that I wouldn't quite end up with as many color splits, but I'm very pleased. I did end up with some white on the shirt, which I was expecting because, like I said, this was a really thick design. But I think it works. And when I photographed the shirt, I think the photographs that are taken when the shirt is laying flat are a little bit darker than the shirt really is. I think the photographs of the shirt on the mannequin are a little bit more representative of the way the color actually turned out on my shirt. But one thing that I've learned with these dyes, which are made specifically for ice dyeing, is this color can look very different depending upon the project you use it on and the kind of fabric you're using the dye on. So that's kind of what makes these colors so much fun, is they're not the same on absolutely everything. And I think that's cool myself. So I love this color combination. I think it looks really cool, but what do you guys think? Do you like the new Rattlesnake color? Have you tried it? What are your thoughts on it? Please drop me some comments down below and let me know. And if you've enjoyed the video, I sure would appreciate it if you would like it and if you'd subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you'll hit the bell, you'll receive a notification whenever I upload a new video. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a great day.